Short-Term Rental Marketing Podcast. All right, welcome. It is the best episode we've been looking forward to. This is the Short-Term Rental Marketing Podcast, and we're here to help you maximize the revenues on your Airbnb short-term rental. So today, I'm excited to tell you we brought in a special guest, and she is going to really help us understand photography and how to list your home with the most remarkable photos so you get booked at a higher rate and a higher occupancy percentage. So before we get to that, today's show comes with a price. I am asking you up front, if you like today's content, if we're helping you, can you please like, share, follow, and comment on today's post? Because without you, and without you sharing to your other friends and co-owners of short-term rentals, we can't spread the message and help people maximize their rentals. With that, I would like to introduce today's special guest, Kathy Ray. Now, Kathy Ray comes from Houston, Texas, and she has been doing this for quite a long time with photography and is really remarkable with her photos, which you'll see in the slideshow as she's talking. So, Kathy, thank you very much for joining us. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. We are excited to have you. So, Kathy, you've got a thriving photography business in Houston, Texas. Tell us a little bit, how'd you get into photography?
Well, I would say it all kind of started with travel photography. I used to do quite a bit of traveling during my college years and when I was first married. And I always just wanted to capture what was in front of me and took my camera basically everywhere. And so I believe what took me to the next level, though, was when my husband bought me my first DSLR, just basically a more complicated camera. And at the time, we lived overseas in Kuwait, and I was able to use it quite a bit exploring the Middle East and Europe for the 4 years that we lived over there.
So I bet looking back in the middle of this pandemic, you see a lot of those photos and can almost take a trip without even leaving your house.
I really enjoy reviewing photos right now that there's not a lot of traveling going on. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, we'll be back up and traveling here soon. Hopefully this will all be over shortly. With that, what led to you to transition from travel photography over to real estate photography?
Well, it was situational. I was a stay-at-home mom of 3 and missing being productive and having a professional side and, some sort of purpose outside of just being a mom. And yep. Although I loved staying home with my children, I also wanted to find something that allowed me to keep that role, yet still get back to working in some form or fashion, and allowing me to keep kind of the hours that I would like to be able to, not be taken from my children. So I knew that I was pretty passionate about photography, and my previous life, I used to be a financial planner and in mortgage business. So it was nice to think, okay, what can I do that would be productive and make a little bit of money, but still use something I'm very passionate about. And so I kind of reinvented that maybe I could use photography and pair that with real estate. And it was my husband that actually planted the seed and said I should give it a shot. So when my in-laws listed their house, it was a great opportunity to, take a stab at it and see how it would work. They did a fantastic job staging the property. So I went over there after the realtor had hired a professional photographer to go through, and I did a test shoot to see if it's something I was capable of doing. The exterior image, I did what you call a sky swap, where I take a boring overcast sky, which is plentiful in Houston, and I took a really beautiful sunset sky and I placed it over the overcast sky. And when I sent the shoot to my in-laws, they forwarded it to the realtor, and he loved that shot so much that he made it his opening leading image for the listing. And from that point forward, he hired me for all of his listings. So I was just trying it out and ended up, immediately right off the bat getting business from it.
funny how that works in life. You are always looking for, or at least I am looking for, how can I have free time? How can I spend time with my family? How can I generate money? And how can I love what I do? And a lot of it comes down to passion. And finding something you can make money on while also being passionate can be achieved by anybody. For me, it's actually marketing on short-term rentals, and it's wonderful to hear you've done that through photography and able to spend time with your family and kids and also make money doing something you love.
It's really been wonderful, and I'm so thankful I could say goodbye to putting a suit on and heading downtown to work in an office. I love what I do. It's very flexible with children, and it's just perfect for where I am in life right now.
Absolutely. So this week I've been reviewing some of the photos on your website, and I'll have in a couple pages here your website and how people can contact you. But the one thing I noticed as I was looking at your photos as compared to the photos I take here in Albuquerque is you are incredibly artistic. Your photos have different lenses and they do a lot of artistic things where my photos are more just plain of fact, here's the property. So what are some of the things you can share with listeners, things you look for to do artistic photos?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the compliment. I guess I try to look at each property from the eyes of the renter or the buyer. For example, does a corner look cozy by a fireplace? I'm going to want to make sure I get an image capturing that vibe so someone can picture themselves there. Is there a view that makes you want to sit and relax with a cup of coffee? I'll need to set the scene up so that a renter or buyer envisions themselves there. Sales is all about creating a need, and owners of Airbnbs are selling an experience. You're not selling the house. You want people to go there for an experience. And my job is to basically paint that picture for them and help create that need of wanting them to escape whatever they have going on in their life and get to your location.
Oh, yeah. And it's so important what you just said. We are selling a vision through the photos of what life would be like for that renter in this home. And it's critical when you're taking the photos that you're thinking about that. If I was staying here, what would I want? What would I be looking for? And the only way we have to relate that with the guests and the renters is actually through the photos and the descriptions that we provide. So this is really your area to perfect that, and it will do, trust me, wonders if you get it right on the amount of money you're making. All right. So with that, you arrive at a property, right? You get on scene. What's the first thing you do?
The first thing I do is study the amenities that the owner is offering. Is there a pool or a view? Are there cozy nooks to read a book or a game room to pass time? Whatever the owner is trying to highlight in their description, it's my job to go around and capture that in a visual to put up on a screen for somebody. So again, we're creating a need to attach to whatever you're saying that you offer.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So keying in on those amenities, a quick story. I stayed at a house up in Durango, and this house was loaded with amenities. And I was actually hesitant to book this property because it looked like there weren't that many amenities included. They didn't advertise them. They spent thousands of dollars setting up these amenities, getting everything ready, and then didn't tell anybody about them. Now, it was a pleasant surprise for me, and I was very happy when I got there. But I couldn't help but thinking, these guys are losing so much money because no one knows they have all these amenities here. So thank you for making sure amenities are on the list and something you're targeting in your photos.
Absolutely, and I would even go further to say that if I create a vision and it's not listed in their description, I would probably drop them a note saying, hey, this image is amazing. You need to make sure you add this on your list of amenities or things that you offer, features, if you will, so that people know, what they're going to walk into.
Absolutely. All right, so one of the biggest questions I get asked consistently from homeowners is, how do you add special touches and highlight the property without misrepresenting the property?
Well, for example, I mentioned before starting my professional photography career with sky swapping my in-laws' property. A great example of misrepresenting would be if I had put an image showcasing a sunset where the sun doesn't actually set. So if you're painting a picture of you've got a cup of coffee, there's a pool in front of you, and the sun's dropping right in front of you, and really the sun drops right behind you, you're definitely misrepresenting your property. Also, I would say maybe using flash photography in rooms can possibly enhance that airy and light, bright feeling. And in actuality, if it's much, much darker, you might be setting your renters up for disappointment. I would not set a scene for an entire breakfast unless breakfast would be provided. So you want to be careful you can accentuate, but definitely don't want to misrepresent and give people a feeling of walking into something that they completely did not expect.
All right. Yeah, it's crazy what you can do with Photoshop nowadays. I have seen these expert editors edit in new couches, edit wires out, change stains off the floor. They can do so many things just with their computer, right? So my advice to the homeowners is you want to edit your photos. You want to put them in the best light. You will know when you went too far when the guests start leaving you reviews that the property was not as advertised, right? So you do have a feedback loop that comes around through your reviews. And if you start seeing comments like, oh, beautiful property, but wasn't what I was expecting, it's probably because you went too far. All right, so it helps to have that feedback loop and something you can look for to test how far can you go without doing it too much.
You're absolutely right. With all the new Photoshop tricks and outsourcing to people who really know their way around Photoshop, you can absolutely misrepresent a property.
All right. We just highlighted what you should do or some of the limits, right? What are some of the things we should do?
Oh, there's a lot you can do. So I would say open all the blinds up, turn on all the lights, make it as bright as possible, put away all clutter and stage the home the best you can. For photography, make sure all fans are in the off position. That would change for video. We'll get to that later, I guess. But the part about creating a need that I mentioned in my last answer would be if your property offers, say, a French press, for example, have a cup of coffee next to the pot of French press coffee and have the fireplace roaring in the background. I would want someone to look at that and then look around at their office at work and think, wow, I really need this in my life. So if you offer fresh white, fluffy white towels, I would have them folded at the base of a bed to give off kind of that spa vibe. Does the owner provide a bottle of wine? Have a bottle of wine outside with a view beyond the glass. So again, we're just creating that need, creating the vibe, making things clutter-free, making things light and bright, just highlighting the best that your property has to offer.
Absolutely. Staging, we're going to talk about a little bit in our top 10 tips. We do have the pro tips coming. As always, towards the end of the podcast. So keep an eye out for that. We will definitely spend some time talking about staging and how to really set up your property for success. Before we get there, I get asked this question all the time as well. What equipment do you need to professionally shoot your home?
I would say that you need a solid DSLR camera, and you would probably need a good tripod because there are going to be low light situations where, when you're holding the camera, it can just not distort, it would blur the image a little bit. So a good solid tripod, a DSLR, and they don't have to be top of the line. In fact, when I first got into this, the first year or two, I used what I had been using for almost a decade. So, and my tripod has been around the world all over the place. It was probably on its last of its three legs. And so I just kind of went with it until I definitely needed to upgrade. So you don't need much, but you do need those two things. And lastly, I would say you need Lightroom or a Photoshop subscription, or nowadays you can go online and outsource and send the images off to someone and let someone else deal with all the editing, because that's a bit of a learning curve, I would say.
Absolutely. I outsource all mine, and I can't edit. It's just not my wheelhouse. But there are people out there that will edit your photos, and they do a remarkable job because that's all they do professionally. Right. I will say this. When it comes to photography, a lot of tripods will work as long as they can hold your camera perfectly still. When it comes to videography, your tripod will make all the difference in the world, because you need to be able to pan your images slowly and at a steady rate. And if you have a low-end tripod, it's going to be jerky. And you don't want jerky on your video. Lenses. You've talked about your full-frame camera. You have a DSLR. And what type of lenses do you recommend for indoor real estate photography?
Well, my workhorse lens is a Canon 16-35 millimeter, and the body of my camera is a 5D Mark IV. I started this off with a generic brand of a Canon lens. It was a Sigma 10-22, which is kind of an ultra wide, but I was using it for landscape photography, traveling. And then before, my body used to be a 50D. Like I said, it did the job, but after a decade of using, I was ready to, upgrade. Those two things together, I love the output. It gives an excellent wide angle view without too much distortion. And distortion is definitely something you have to worry about when you're working with real estate, because you kind of need a big view of what you're looking at, and the wider you go, the more distorted the sides become. And what I mean by that is your vertical lines will then look bowed and rounded, and kind of gives that fisheye look, I guess. And it really, if you can you want to take a good picture of it, but not be so wide that you're getting an unrealistic view, or stretching it out to where it's not as big as it looks.
And it can be very hard, indoor photography, working in a small space, to get that wide view. All right. I use the 10-18 lens. I have a fisheye look to mine, and the editors, they remove that the best they can. But like I said, there's a tremendous difference between my photos and what I see on your site.
Well, thank you. Another lens that I use and take with myself quite a bit is the 35 millimeter, and I use that for more detailed shots. So a wide angle lens isn't going to let you kind of focus in on certain details of the property, like certain woodwork or tile work. It can definitely offer some, kind of create the vibe a little more, I would.
All right. So one of the other things that has been new in real estate photography, or just photography in general, is the new mirrorless cameras. Now, I bought a mirrorless camera. I went with the Canon M50, very entry level. Some of these cameras, while amazing, can run $4,000 for a complete setup with just one lens, right? Have you any recommendations on, is the mirrorless worth it, or are the DSLRs still plenty capable of shooting real estate photography?
Well, I just in the last year and a half upgraded my whole system, and I did not go the mirrorless route. Although I know a lot of people in real estate photography who swear by it and 100% back it. I guess time will tell. You know, it's something kind of newer on the market. It's not been out for ages. So maybe the next time I upgrade, that might be something I take a look at. For the time being, though, I chose to stick with, that 5D Mark IV that I went with.
Sure. And with the DSLR, what kind of price range are people looking at to buy this sort of camera?
You said 4,000 for lens and body, and I paid more than that for my setup. But there is nothing that says you have to go buy brand new. I just take so many thousands of photos. I really just wanted to get what I wanted to get. I worked very hard to get that. But for somebody who's getting into it, entry level, or somebody who wants something nicer but is under a budget, I would say there's definitely a lot of secondhand products that you can look at. In fact, I told you I spent more than that. I actually bought it off the Canon website. I can't think of the word. What is it when certified? I bought it certified, pre-owned off the Canon website, both the lens and the camera. So I got a bit of a deal on it, and I waited until the price dropped on it because they were going to come out with the next best thing. So I bought right when that was about to be already on the out.
Sure. I think on my end, I've got about $1,500 invested in my camera and lens. And again, I have entry-level professional photography equipment, whereas Kathy is using professional high-grade equipment. So, all right. Well, thank you, Kathy. To reach Kathy, a couple important things. She does have a Facebook page. It is Catherine Ray Photography, Real Estate Photography. You also have her email, which is catherinerayphotography@yahoo.com. Is that the best ways to reach you?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay, fantastic. All right, we're going to move into the next section here. What is the difference between professional photos and cell phone photos? I'm going to take this one because I get asked this all the time. You spent thousands of dollars setting up your Airbnb short-term rental. You invested in furniture, you invested in down payments on the property, you invested in money to rent the property, however you came to own it. You have spent thousands of dollars getting all the amenities, the blenders, the dishes, the microwaves, all of it. When it comes to marketing, your cell phone is not the same as what you will produce with a professional photographer, right? So I am urging you, stop using cell phones and go hire a professional photographer to shoot your home. Or if you're capable, do it yourself. But stop using cell phones, all right? The purpose of this show is not to be an average income earning listing. Our goal is to boost your revenues and maximize your revenue with the best marketing possible. And to do that, you need a professional photographer. All right, so I hope that answers the question for everybody, because it's one of the ones I get more often than not. Trust me, go out, hire the professional. All right, so we're now going into our top 8 tips. All right. So tip number 1, set the scene. This is staging the home. Kathy, you talked about this a little bit. Setting out towels, setting out a wine bottle, opening up all the blinds. How important is it to open up all the blinds in the home?
Hugely important. You want to have a nice bright image. There are definitely going to be properties that might be dark and moody, And I guess if you know your audience and you know the type of people that you're catering to, that's one thing. But I would say in general, light and bright and airy is what is the trend today.
Absolutely. And beyond opening up the blinds, I personally am turning in every light bulb in that house because it is going to do two things. One, it's going to create good shadows between the light and the darkness. The second thing is the human eye is attracted to light. If you have very dark photos, people are not going to really look at them. But if you have the lights on, their eye will be drawn to your listing. So open up the blinds, turn on all the lights, set out beautiful flowers. Every time I go out and I stage a property, I'm investing $50 to $100 in flowers and fruit and different things to make the home look very nice. All right, tip number 2, resolution matters. You need to have photos that are extremely detailed and show your property in a high definition manner. Kathy, what kind of resolution are you shooting with on your camera?
My 5D Mark IV has over 30 megapixels, so it definitely helps create a solid, crisp image, definitely.
Fantastic. I will also tell you, resolution isn't everything, because my Samsung 10 camera that I use, the Galaxy 10, goes up to 108 megapixels. The pixels off of that are not as nice as my mirrorless camera. So while resolution does matter, there's other things in these professional cameras that matters as well. All right. Number 3, take your photos with a wide angle lens. Now, we talked about this a little bit. I'm using a 10 to 18. Kathy's shooting with an 18 to 35. The key is if you're inside a house, you've got to make that room appear in the whole image. If you're using a very narrow angle lens, you're only going to see a piece of what you're trying to shoot. So make sure you've got the wide angle on here, that you're covering the whole room.
I have a little something to add to that, Carl. Your 10 to 18, something that I learned is if you have that all the way out to 10, you're going to experience a lot more distortion. So even on my 16 to 34, rather than stand closer and have it all the way open at 16, I try to get back as far as I can and zoom it in a little bit, and that helps tremendously with the distortion that you'll experience. So you're really going to try to get back as far as possible and zoom to try to avoid distortion.
Absolutely. One of the best tools I love in photography is, like anything else in life, Google. You can Google your lens and ask what the sweet spot is, and people will tell you, oh, you want to be shooting that lens at, 15 millimeter. Everything has the ability to be looked up on that. All right, so add a variety of photos. I get asked, how many photos should my property have? The more, the better. All right. Photograph all the rooms. Photograph all the beds. Photograph all the amenities. We're talking about the washer, dryer, the blenders, the crock pots, pools, hot tubs, TVs. Wow, get those TVs. You spent hundreds of dollars on this 70-inch TVs, right? Make sure you got great photos of it. And pro tip here, your editors can actually put a nice image on the TV because it's hard to photograph a TV that's turned on. All right, a couple other things. Highlight safety and unique amenities. So when we talk about safety, things like the first aid kit, the fire extinguisher, different things if you have a pool, a fence around the pool to protect children, anything like that. I will promise you, there are people booking the property, and one of their concerns is this property safe for my family? So highlight those and make sure you're telling the story of not only is it beautiful, but you're going to have a safe stay.
I second that, because even myself, when looking at a property, if I see, a gorgeous staircase, all I envision are my kids tumbling down it if there's not a gate at the top of the stairs to help me, feel a little more relaxed during my vacation.
Absolutely. And that's from a mother of three. Trust me, there are mothers out there booking these properties. Don't be afraid to highlight we have fire extinguishers and things of that nature.
We think about those things, absolutely.
Absolutely. Showcase accessibility features. Now, not every home is suited for disabilities. I have a lot of one-story homes that are. And when I'm looking at those homes, I'm trying to photograph the entryway. Are people going to have to go upstairs in order to get into the home, or is there a flat route in? Think about those things and think about how you can make your home more inclusive to more renters. Tip number 7. You want to inspire feelings for your guests in your photos, and that's not easy to do. I do an okay job of this, sort of, but your photos really bring the home to life and inspire those feelings. So how do you do that?
Well, I guess a good way to do it is to look at it from a standpoint of, if I'm in this house, what do I want to do in this house? Do I want to sit and have my coffee at the kitchen island? Do I want to sit by the pool in a lawn chair in the perfect little spot that, would be nice and relaxing? My job, I guess, looking at a property is to picture different activities that people will be doing, and then try to capture that with my camera and highlight those spaces so that people can see themselves doing it, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. So number 1, picture the space, picture what people will be doing there. One of the things I use is props. And I know you've talked about that, the bottle of wine, the towels, the robe. All of these things can inspire feelings.
Absolutely.
Get that, get that relaxing vibe or that adventure vibe. You've got to know your property and what you're shooting for.
Yes, I mean, if you offer kayaks, I would say, I think I've even seen myself when I'm looking through different photos of, potentially renting my own place for vacation. Some people will actually show the kayaks in use. So, if there's a beautiful lake nearby that's got a gorgeous sunset, put the kayak in the water, take that picture, take it at the perfect time so that when people get to that picture and then they see that you provide kayaks, they think, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I want that same experience.
Absolutely. One thing I've noticed, when it comes to Airbnb photography, it's a little bit different than selling your home photography. And I will tell you that photographers charge more to photograph an Airbnb. The reason being, your short-term rental has to inspire those feelings. And your photographer, if they're good, are going to do those extra things like putting that kayak in the water and making sure to inspire those feelings. Tip number 8, find the light. Your job, and we talked about this a little bit already, bright, lights on, all the light coming through the shades, open them up, right? You also want to be able to see through the windows to the outside of the home. Now, you do a remarkable job of light in your photos. What are some tips you'd use for shooting light and getting the best out of the homes with their light?
Like you mentioned, open up those blinds nice and bright, open the windows. Sometimes I even open a front door just to get an extra burst of light, if the door's behind me and the camera's in front of me. Turn on every single light, especially mood lighting. Is there a reading light? Turn it on. Is there a light underneath the kitchen cabinets? Turn it on. It makes it nice and bright, and that's the look people are going for these days. Nobody wants a dingy, dark place to stay in. Or maybe some people do, but majority of people do not.
There's some hermit crabs out there that are like,
There
give me the
is.
darkness.
When you're photographing the light, and let's say you have a bright window in the room, are you setting the camera to capture the light of the window or the room?
I meter my camera to the room, not the window. So what you can do, and what's a huge trend these days, is to take a picture of the light the light meter focused on the window and adjust it to make the window completely in proper exposure, and then to take an image of the room properly exposed, and then you either outsource or you can do it yourself. You merge those photos together in Photoshop, and it creates the best of both worlds, because what our eyes see as the human eye is a perfectly exposed outside and inside, but the camera, they're just not as advanced. They're not advanced enough to be able to do both at the same time. So I don't believe it's misrepresenting. It's very, it's an okay thing to do. I would say 100%. But you want to definitely have a balance of exterior and interior. And you don't have to highlight the exterior. If it's a terrible view or it's a house right next to you, you might like a more blown out look from the window, so it doesn't really highlight the fact that, you know, there's somebody right next to you, a brick wall or something. But if you've got a nice looking view outside, you're going to definitely want to do a blend and either outsource it or do it yourself, get the best of both worlds and get both images merged. In fact, every image I take, interior and exterior, is a HDR image, which is, it stands for high dynamic range. And it takes an image and then it takes that same image underexposed and then that same image overexposed, and then it merges. My camera does it without me having to do it in post editing. It'll merge it all at the same time. So when I put that into my computer, it pops up automatically merged.
Sure. That's definitely one of the things on my camera. Everything has to be done post edit. It's one of the advantages of buying one of the very expensive cameras out there, is you can get some more automation. I bet it is. Oh, yeah. So we've now talked about the things to do with your short-term rental photography. I now want to transition to photos to avoid, and this is extremely important. This is your pro tips continued. Dark photos. We're not renting to hermits. They're far and few in between. All right? Dirt and clutter. When you're staging your home, I want you to look for things like wires. All right? Disconnect that toaster. Hide the wire. Disconnect the TV. Hide the wires. And any clutter. All right? I promise you, and it was actually a lesson I learned once. Quick story. I was doing a home tour of a brand new DR Horton home, and I was walking through it. I'm like, this house is incredible. It was one of the staged homes for sale, right? And I'm looking at it, I'm like, this home's so beautiful. I want to live here. It just inspired me, right? I went home, I looked around my house, and I thought, gosh, my house is almost identical to that DR Horton home. It's only about 10 years older. What's the difference? It was at that moment I realized the difference was minimalism. And they didn't have all the junk, the paperwork piled up, the books, the knickknacks, right? You want to get rid of all that stuff that you can in your photos. Minimalism sells on Airbnbs, all right? If you do have a lot of knickknacks, try and position them so they're in a good location and the home photographs well. All right. Number 3, people. We are trying to sell an Airbnb short-term rental that the guest can picture themselves in. If you are in the photos, if you're in the pool, showing, oh, it's so much fun, it actually makes it hard for the guests to picture them in the pool.
They're now looking at you.
I would include
All right,
animals
so-
in that as well. I've actually seen quite a few animals, a dog in the corner and stuff. I would definitely try to remove that.
Absolutely. You want to just avoid those things. Stick to just the home. You don't need to hire actors. You want to have the home in all of its beauty. All right. Last pro tip. This one is from the VRBO conference I attended a couple years ago. Statistically, if you have a photo of a toilet in your listing, you're going to do about 10% worse in the amount of bookings you get compared to listings that don't have a toilet in it. Now, this is challenging. How do you shoot a bathroom without getting the toilet in there? All right. So, Kathy, if you're trying to shoot a bathroom, how would you avoid the toilet?
You can try to play around with the angles. Sometimes it's impossible not to. My rule of thumb is 100% make sure that the toilet seat is down at least, because sometimes you're not able to avoid getting a picture of a bathroom, but you can try to take it more straight on to the mirror and just be lowered a little bit and take it from that angle, and that can help block the toilet out. But sometimes you need to be able to get the bathtub and the shower, and it might be impossible to do so without having a shot of the toilet in there. So just, make sure you do the best you can to avoid it. And if it has to be in there, please make sure that toilet seat is closed.
Absolutely. And on my personal listings, if I can't get the photo without the toilet in it, I'm just not going to put the photo on my listing at all. People know you have bathrooms. You don't need to show them. All right. So that is the conclusion of our professional tips and the interview. And now we're going to transition to the questions that you guys have sent in to me through social media. And I appreciate you participating in today's podcast. So we're going to hit these rapidly. These are going to be 15 to 30-second answers. And we're going to cover all of the questions. All right, so first up. Should one invest in proper digital camera, or is a mobile phone okay?
Well, I think we already covered that. I would say either invest in a DSLR mirrorless or mirrorless, or outsource to somebody like me to come and take the photos. So even though some of these new
taking
iPhones,
photos with your mobile phone,
and some of these phones are amazing, but they still are just not going to give the output that you would get from a professional camera.
All right, I'm going to skip question 2 here because we covered it. Number 3 we kind of covered. Is the wide-angle lens misleading to the client?
If it's an ultra-wide-angle lens, it can be. So you definitely, like I mentioned before, in an effort to avoid distortion and misleading, I would say try to zoom in a little bit and keep it as realistic as possible.
Absolutely. Also, watch your reviews. If people are telling you the photos do not match up to the reality, you've gone too far. All right, what distinguishes a good photo from a great photo?
Those special touches I mentioned. If there is a fireplace, Photoshop a roaring fire in it. If you offer a sauna, put some pretty white towels outside of it and create the mood. Make the property as bright and inviting as you can, and we can go into settings quickly for this question. There's something called an f-stop on our camera, and it basically brings everything into focus when it's set on a higher setting, and it will focus on one plane or depth of field, if you will. If it is set to the lowest setting, it will cause just one feature to stand out while blurring what's in front of or behind. So you can play with that, especially with Airbnb photography. You might want to highlight just that cup of coffee and kind of have a blurred background or a blurred foreground. A good tripod will negate the need to kind of adjust your shutter speed, and the same with your ISO. And again, if you're familiar with photography terms, these are all the 3 things that you need to move up and down in order to create like a perfect image. So you can get away with quite a bit using a tripod, basically.
Absolutely.
All right, next question. What's the value of having both photos and videos of your property? We've beaten the photos to death today and highlighted how important it is. Let's talk video real quick. I provide a video tour of every property under the Irvie Homes umbrella. Reason why is, number one, people like seeing it. It gets me more bookings. It helps with my social media marketing, and it helps get people on the YouTube channel, and then they subscribe and they see all the updates. Number two, it gives them the most realistic picture of what this property looks like when you do the video walkthrough. Now, video walkthroughs are not cheap. You're going to have to pay for this, right? But get it done. It is incredibly artistic. You can have moving fans, and you can have the TVs showing beautiful things, and you can go through and show the whole house in its best light. All right. How to resize photos to meet the spec requirements of VRBO. This is important. You're going to need to talk to your professional photographer about this. There are certain megapixel requirements that you will have to meet. And you can usually always go with high definition photos, but there are some photos that are too low resolution, and the channels and platforms like Airbnb, Verbo, they will reject them. Also, make sure to talk to your photographer about this up front. They are providing a service. That service may not always include giving you multiple, what's the word I'm looking for? Multiple examples of that photos or exposures of that photo. So, Kathy, you provide your photos. What kind of megapixels are those when they usually come out of the back end?
It varies because there's different MLS listings that are going to require something. A VRBO, let's say, would require something different. So it just depends. What I would say is you look at the guidelines for that specific host, and from there, what they say to do, then you have your photographer resize it from there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, fantastic. All right, what photos should a host consider as lead photos?
I would say, what is your best feature? Do you have an infinity pool hanging over a cliff? That probably needs to be your opening photo, not the outside of it in the front yard. You wouldn't want to like put a picture up of the master closet. That's not going to be what's going to drive people to stop scrolling, pause, and think, wow, I need to be there like right now. So whatever your killer feature is of your entire property, that should be your opening image, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I have mixed feelings on this question. When I was at my VRBO conference, they said statistically, if you have a picture of the outside of the building, people are going to book your place more, statistically speaking. The reason being is people are concerned you have a beautiful property that might be surrounded by a slum. And that's an important thing, going back to safety, that people look for. However, if I have a very unique amenity or something amazing in that home, I'm going to lead with that. And my second photo is now going to be the outside of that property from the front yard, so people can see it's in a good, safe place. All right. Let's see. Quick question. Walk us back through tying the listing descriptions to the summaries and the photos. I'll take this question, Kathy. For the descriptions, this goes into the algorithms of the platforms. If you provide a description on the photo, it will actually move you up in the rankings, so your listing will be shown before other listings. Very important to have those descriptions in there. Also important, don't overdo it, because those descriptions show up over the photo and they will take control and take people's eyes off the photo, and instead they're reading. So it's a happy medium there. How many photos does the average professional photographer take?
I take quite a few, and I typically deliver 50 images. That's kind of my package, but I take a lot more than that, and then I go home in front of my computer and decide what to toss and what to keep based on what the owner would probably tell me is kind of what they're hoping to feature. So if it's a smaller property and I'm afraid I might not get 50 images, I will, like I mentioned before, take my Canon 35L prime lens, and I will take closer shots of woodwork, tile work, kind of those detailed shots that give you a better vibe of what to expect in the house, not just this house, but more detailed features. There's also a style called, I believe it's called editorial, where it looks like a magazine. So you would probably take a smaller lens and you would be at the entrance of a room and have kind of the door handle in the frame and then the bed just beyond. Kind of gives you that magazine editorial vibe. And images like that really make a great, extra added on feature to if you're trying to, bulk up the amount of images you have.
Yeah. You do a great job with that.
Well, thank you.
So,
One last thing on there. Minimum 30 images, guys. You want more photos. The only exception to that is if you're only doing a studio, it's hard to get 30 images of just a studio. But if you're dealing with a two-bedroom house or larger, get more photos. Something else I do is look for nearby amenities, whether there's a public pool or a public park or a pet park for like a dog run, things like that. I'm going to capture those things, hiking trails, right? I bring that into the listings so people know what's around them. How much does an average photo shoot cost for a short-term rental?
Well, it depends a little bit on the size of the property and the types of amenities. Are we doing images of the entrance to the property? Do you have a golf course that I need to travel to? Is there a clubhouse I need to go to, or common area pool with a barbecue pit? Those are all things to take into consideration. It's pricier, so Airbnb and VRBO, short-term rentals, are basically images that you get to keep. Whereas if I do this for a realtor who's listing a property for sale, it's a very short-term licensing on my images. So a photographer tends to charge quite a bit more because this is an indefinite listing. It's not going to end in 2 months or 3 months. It's an ongoing service.
I want everybody to listen to this. The photographer owns the images. You need to upfront discuss how long you'll be able to use these images for. I personally mandate to all my photographers, I get rights to use these images for as long as I want. And I get it in writing because that is critical, right? I'm running a business here. I'm not selling a property like a realtor and only need it for 3 months. All right, so make sure you get that signed off and that you will own these images.
I would definitely recommend that. In fact, I'm in a few Facebook groups that are, I think it's called Photography Law or something like that. And people will take the shoot from when the property was purchased and turn those, they might turn it into an Airbnb and decide that they want to use those images. And the photographer will come onto this group and say, what do I do? Just send them an invoice or cease and desist? So it definitely steps on toes, and I would definitely up front have everything lined out in writing. I personally, if I do a shoot for somebody and I'm charging them, short-term rental pricing, those are your images. Do with it what you want for as long as you want. But there are photographers out there who will absolutely have an expiration on those images, and they will do searches online to make sure their images aren't in use by other companies. It's a very sensitive topic for a lot of photographers.
Absolutely. And your photographers, they are artists. They're out there doing an incredible job. They have spent thousands of hours practicing for this moment. All right, take care of them. Make sure you discuss these things up front and make sure they're getting paid for their services. Last question of the day. What are some of your favorite angles and shots that are a must inside of a property?
Well, let me tackle the angle one first. My number one angle, and this is like a number one rule in real estate photography, and I learned this after I had kind of been doing it for a few months, is that you want your verticals to be straight. You can do that the best you can pre-editing and do it when you're live with the camera. You're going to set your camera up not to be tilting down, not to be tilting up. You want it straight on, and that's why that tripod is coming into place so much. You're going to adjust it. You're going to even look at your little level on your tripod and make sure it is as straight on as possible, and that will help with that wonky kind of clown house or playhouse feel. It definitely makes a huge difference. The other thing is, I cannot tell you how many people want to stick their camera above their head and tilt down and give like an angled bird's eye view. That's not what you're trying to do. In fact, you're not even trying to do it. Yeah, I don't want that. And you don't even want it from eye level. So my tripod is actually set up to shoot right about at my waist. And that's going to give you a very straight on image, enough of the ground, enough of the ceiling. You get a good feel of a room with that angle. So angle is huge when it comes to real estate photography. You can't really get too creative with that one. What was the other part of your question?
I think that really covers it. When it comes to angles, there are endless angles you can shoot from. You need to experiment, but you've got to make sure those verticals, the up and down, is straight. You do not want to be tilted down. You don't want to be tilted up. Also, keep in mind, depending on your height, perspective can change. I'm taller, right? So my perspective is at 6 foot. My wife's perspective, don't tell anybody this, 4'11", right? There's a huge difference in the world if you just bend down and look at that. So me personally, when I'm shooting, I'm like somewhere like right around my chest here. All right. All right, well, that concludes today's program. Kathy, thank you so much for joining us. Greatly appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I hope you as the viewers got a lot out of today's episode and you understand a little bit more about photography and how critical it is. All right, and lastly, if you enjoyed today's content, please like, share, follow, and comment on our videos. We greatly appreciate you, and we'll see you next week.